Bruce Lee was not supposed to die like this. Not at 32. Not in silence. Not in a small apartment in Hong Kong, just weeks before the whole world was about to see him become something bigger than a movie star. He was an action hero, a martial artist, a cultural force. A man who had already changed the way people looked at fighting, discipline, speed, and screen presence. But on July 20th, 1973, the man millions believed was almost untouchable was suddenly gone. And from the very first moment, people asked the same question: how? How could Bruce Lee die so suddenly? How could a man in peak physical condition complain of a headache, take one painkiller, lie down for a short nap, and never wake up again? That question did not disappear with time. It only became louder, because Bruce Lee was not just famous, he was becoming unstoppable. His new film, Enter the Dragon, was about to be released. It was not just another Hong Kong martial arts film. It was the film that could take Bruce Lee from Asian superstar to global legend. Hollywood was watching. Hong Kong was watching. The martial arts world was watching. And Bruce knew it. He had worked for this moment for years. He had fought for respect. He had fought for control. He had fought to prove that an Asian leading man could carry a major international film. And now, just before the door opened, everything stopped. One day, Bruce Lee was alive, strong, focused, planning his future, talking about his next movie, pushing toward the dream he had chased for so long. And the next day, the world was hearing that he was dead. For his fans, it felt impossible. For Hong Kong, it felt like a national shock. For his family, it was more than shock. It was pain. And for those who were closest to him, the question remained: what really happened that day? The official explanation was simple. Bruce Lee died from a reaction to a painkiller. But the story around that explanation was anything but simple. Because Bruce did not die at home. He did not die in a hospital bed. He did not die surrounded by doctors. He died after being found unconscious in the apartment of actress Betty Ting Pei. And that detail changed everything. Suddenly, Bruce Lee's death was no longer only a medical tragedy. It became a mystery, a scandal, a story filled with rumors, suspicion, unanswered questions, and whispers that would follow his name for decades. People wanted to know why Bruce was there. They wanted to know who was with him. They wanted to know why help did not come sooner. They wanted to know why a man so strong could fall asleep and never open his eyes again. The day began like any other day in the life of a man under pressure. Bruce Lee was in Hong Kong. He was busy, he was famous, he was tired, and he was carrying the weight of enormous expectation. The world saw the muscles, the speed, the confidence, the scream, the lightning-fast kicks. But behind the image, Bruce was still human. He was working constantly. He was planning movies. He was dealing with business pressure. He was preparing for what might become the biggest moment of his career. And on that day, he went to Betty Ting Pei's apartment. But he was not alone. With him was Raymond Chow, his producer and business partner. Together, they were connected through films, money, ambition, and the future of Hong Kong cinema. They had helped make history together. But behind the success, tension had started to grow. Because when money becomes big, trust becomes fragile. And Bruce Lee was no longer just an actor taking orders. He was becoming a power of his own. He wanted control. He wanted respect. He wanted what he believed he had earned. And people close to the film industry knew there were business pressures around him. But that afternoon, the reason for the meeting was supposed to be creative. They were discussing Bruce's next project, a film called Game of Death. It was meant to be another step forward. Another film that would push Bruce's ideas even further. Another chance to show the world something no one had seen before. Inside the apartment, the conversation continued. Scripts, scenes, plans, future work. Bruce Lee was not supposed to be at the end of his story. He was supposed to be preparing the next chapter. Then, around the evening, Bruce complained of a headache, a simple headache. The kind of thing anyone could have, the kind of thing no one expects to become fatal. Betty gave him a painkiller. Bruce took it. Then he went to lie down. A nap, nothing more. That is what makes the story so disturbing. There was no dramatic final battle, no warning to the world, no long hospital struggle, no final speech, just a headache, a tablet, a bed, and silence. Raymond Chow left the apartment for dinner. Bruce remained there with Betty. Hours passed. At first, maybe no one thought anything was wrong. Bruce was resting. Bruce was sleeping. Bruce was recovering from a headache. But later that night, when Raymond called to check on him, the situation changed. Betty could not wake him. That is the moment the mystery becomes darker. Because when someone cannot be awakened, every second matters. Every minute becomes important. Every decision becomes part of the story. And this is where people later began to ask difficult questions. Why was an ambulance not called immediately? Why was there a delay? Why did people try to reach private doctors first? Why did Bruce Lee, one of the most famous men in Hong Kong, not get emergency help faster? These questions do not approve wrongdoing, but they do create doubt. And doubt is what kept this mystery alive. A doctor was called. Then another doctor. Time passed. Bruce was unconscious, unresponsive, not breathing normally. The situation was no longer ordinary. This was an emergency. But by the time medical help fully entered the picture, precious time had already slipped away. When Bruce Lee was finally taken to the hospital, it was too late. The doctors could not save him. And at 11:30 p.m., Bruce Lee was officially declared dead, 32 years old, on the edge of international superstardom, gone. The news spread like fire. At first, many people could not believe it. Some thought it had to be a mistake. Some thought it was a rumor. Some waited for someone to correct the story. But the correction never came. Bruce Lee was dead. And immediately, the public wanted someone or something to blame. The official answer said it was a medical reaction. But the public looked at the apartment. They looked at Betty Ting Pei. They looked at Raymond Chow. They looked at the delayed call for an ambulance. They looked at the business tensions. They looked at the strange timing. And they wondered whether the full truth had really been told. Betty became the center of public anger. Raymond became the center of public suspicion. Rumors moved faster than facts. People began creating their own versions of what happened inside that apartment. Some were wild, some were cruel, some were impossible to prove. But all of them came from the same place: shock. Because people could not accept that Bruce Lee had died from something so ordinary: a painkiller, a headache, a nap. It sounded too small for a man who had seemed larger than life. And that is why the mystery survived. Because Bruce Lee's death was not only a death, it was a question that stayed with his fans, a question that stayed with his family, a question that still follows his name today. What really happened on July 20th, 1973? And was the official explanation enough? After Bruce Lee was declared dead, the world wanted one thing: an answer. Not a rumor, not a whisper, not a story told by frightened witnesses. A real answer. Because Bruce Lee was not just another actor. He was the man people believed could not be stopped. He was speed, he was power, he was confidence, he was discipline, he was the body everyone looked at and thought, this man is in complete control. But on the night of July 20th, 1973, control disappeared. A headache became a medical emergency, a nap became a nightmare, and a private apartment became the center of one of the most talked about mysteries in movie history. At first, the explanation seemed simple. Bruce Lee had taken a painkiller. He had reacted badly. His brain had swollen. He died. That was the official story. But for many people, that explanation was too small, too quiet, too ordinary. Because nothing about Bruce Lee felt ordinary. So the public started looking at the details. And the details made the story harder to accept. The first detail was the location. Bruce Lee was found unconscious in the apartment of actress Betty Ting Pei. That alone was enough to create a storm. People wanted to know why he was there. They wanted to know what really happened inside that apartment. They wanted to know why the world's most famous martial artist had died away from his own home, away from his family, and away from the public eye. Betty quickly became the focus of attention. Some saw her as a witness. Some saw her as a victim of public anger. Others treated her like a suspect before the full facts were even understood. That is what happens when a legend dies suddenly. People do not wait calmly. They search for a person to blame. And Betty was the last person known to be with Bruce after Raymond Chow left the apartment. But she was not the only person connected to that final evening. Raymond Chow was there too. And his role raised another set of questions. Raymond was Bruce Lee's producer, his business partner, the man behind Golden Harvest, the man who had helped turn Bruce into the biggest star in Hong Kong cinema. Together, they had made films that broke box office records. They had built something powerful. But by 1973, Bruce Lee was no longer just a star working for a studio. He was becoming bigger than the studio. He had his own ideas, his own creative control, his own future. And that future may not have included everyone who had once controlled his career. There were stories of tension, tension over money, tension over business, tension over where Bruce would go after Enter the Dragon. Because everyone knew that film could change everything. If it succeeded, Bruce Lee would not only belong to Hong Kong anymore. He would belong to the world. Hollywood would want him. Studios would chase him. Producers would need him more than he needed them. That made the timing of his death even more disturbing. He died just before the world was about to open for him, just before the release that could have made him an international superstar, just before all the power around him could have shifted. Again, this does not prove anything criminal, but in a mystery, motive is never ignored. And people kept asking the same uncomfortable question: who benefited from Bruce Lee being gone? For many fans, that question became dangerous. Because once the imagination starts, it does not stop. Some people believe the official story. Some believed there was a cover-up. Some blamed Betty. Some questioned Raymond. Some whispered about the underworld. Some even spoke of curses. The truth was becoming buried under speculation. But there was one fact that remained impossible to ignore: the delay in getting emergency help. That delay became one of the most haunting parts of the entire case. Because when Bruce Lee could not be awakened, the first response should have been urgent. An unconscious person is not simply sleeping. An unresponsive person is not resting. When someone cannot be woken up, time becomes the enemy. But according to the timeline, an ambulance was not the first call. Instead, attempts were made to contact private doctors. Raymond Chow reportedly tried to reach his personal doctor. When that did not work, Betty's doctor was contacted. Only later was an ambulance called. That detail kept investigators, fans, and family members asking questions for decades. Why not call emergency services immediately? Why call a private doctor first? Was it confusion? Was it panic? Was it an attempt to avoid scandal? Was it because they did not understand how serious Bruce's condition was? Or was there another reason? Nobody can go back into that room and hear the voices. Nobody can feel the panic of that exact moment. But the timeline remains, and the timeline is painful. Bruce was found unconscious. Then time passed, calls were made, a doctor arrived. CPR was attempted, an ambulance was finally called. Bruce reached the hospital much later, and by then the situation was hopeless. This is why the story is so tragic. Because even if there was no foul play, the delay still matters. Even if every person in that apartment was innocent, the delay still hurts. Even if Bruce's death was caused by a rare medical reaction, people still wonder whether faster help could have changed the outcome. That is the terrible question. Could Bruce Lee have survived if the ambulance came sooner? No one can answer that with certainty. But once that question exists, it never disappears. It stays with the case. It stays with the family. It stays with the fans. And it makes the official explanation feel incomplete. The official documents focused on the medical cause, brain swelling, reaction to a painkiller, death by misadventure. But the public focused on the human choices. Who saw him first? Who called whom? Who waited? Who decided not to call the ambulance immediately? Who understood the danger? Who did not? Those are not small questions, because a death is not only about the final medical event, it is also about the path that leads there. And Bruce Lee's final path was full of strange turns. He was at Betty's apartment. Raymond left for dinner. Betty could not wake him. Private doctors were called. The ambulance came late. The hospital could not save him. Then the world was told that a painkiller had killed the strongest man they had ever seen on screen. For many people, it was too much to accept. The grief became suspicion. The suspicion became rumor. And the rumor became legend. But beneath all of it, there was still a real medical question. What exactly happened inside Bruce Lee's body? The autopsy showed swelling of the brain. That was not imagination, that was real. His brain had become dangerously swollen. Something had triggered a fatal reaction. The official explanation focused on aspirin in the painkiller. But later, experts began looking more closely, because the tablet Bruce took was not only aspirin, it also contained another drug, a drug used as a tranquilizer. A drug that, in rare cases, could cause dangerous reactions. This changed the direction of the mystery. Maybe Bruce Lee was not poisoned. Maybe he was not murdered. Maybe he was not cursed. Maybe the answer was hidden inside one ordinary-looking tablet. A tablet given for a headache. A tablet no one expected to be dangerous. A tablet that may have triggered a rare reaction no one in that room could predict. And that possibility is almost more frightening than any conspiracy. Because conspiracies need enemies. But rare medical reactions need only bad luck. One body, one tablet, one terrible moment. That is what makes Bruce Lee's death so haunting. It feels too simple, too random, too cruel. But sometimes death does not arrive like a villain. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Inside a room, inside a choice, inside a pill taken for pain. And for Bruce Lee, the man who seemed faster than fate itself, that may have been the final mystery. Not who killed him, but how something so small could take someone so great. For decades, Bruce Lee's death lived between two worlds. One world had the official explanation, a rare reaction, a swollen brain, a tragic accident. The other world had questions, rumors, suspicion. People who believed something had been hidden. People who could not accept that one small tablet could end the life of the most famous martial artist on earth. And that is why the investigation could not stop at emotion. It had to return to evidence, not fan theories, not gossip, not old whispers from the film industry. Evidence, documents, medical reports, witness statements, court records, toxicology, the timeline. Because if there was a truth buried under 50 years of mystery, it would not be found in rumor, it would be found in the details. The official record said Bruce Lee died from cerebral edema, a fatal swelling of the brain. That part was not really in dispute. His brain had swollen dangerously. The question was why? What caused it? What triggered such a violent reaction inside a body that seemed so strong, so trained, so disciplined? In 1973, the answer focused on the painkiller Bruce Lee took that night. The tablet was given to him after he complained of a headache. He swallowed it. He lay down. He never woke up. For investigators, that tablet became the key. But the public heard a simple version. Bruce Lee had died from a reaction to aspirin, and that sounded almost impossible. Aspirin was common. Millions of people used it. People took it for headaches, body pain, fever, and many ordinary conditions. How could aspirin kill Bruce Lee? That question stayed in people's minds. Because if the explanation sounds too strange, people begin to look for something else. And for years, many believed there had to be something more. Maybe someone poisoned him. Maybe someone delayed help on purpose. Maybe someone had a business motive. Maybe the truth had been protected. But science asks a colder question, not who do people suspect? Not what story feels dramatic, but what does the body show? What does the chemistry show? What does the medicine show? And when experts later looked again at the tablet Bruce Lee took, one important detail became clearer. The tablet was not only aspirin, it contained another drug, meprobamate, a tranquilizer. A drug once used to reduce anxiety, stress, and tension. At one time, it was widely prescribed. Many people took it. Many believed it was safe enough. But later, medicine began to understand that some drugs can be dangerous in rare and unpredictable ways. A drug may be safe for thousands of people and deadly for one. That is what makes rare reactions so terrifying. They do not always give warning. They do not always depend on strength. They do not care if the person is young. They do not care if the person is famous. They do not care if the person trains every day. The wrong body meets the wrong chemical at the wrong moment, and everything changes. This is where the mystery turns. Because maybe the real question was never simply, did aspirin kill Bruce Lee? Maybe the better question was, what exactly was inside the pill? And could one of those ingredients have triggered a fatal reaction? For a forensic expert, the answer had to be careful. There could be no wild claims, no dramatic accusation, no easy villain. Only the evidence. Bruce Lee had taken the painkiller. After that, he became unconscious. His brain swelled. He died. No clear proof of poison, no proven attack, no confirmed murder plot. But there was a possible medical explanation, a rare reaction to the drug combination, especially the meprobamate. And this explanation is haunting because it is not theatrical. It does not sound like a movie. It does not sound like a conspiracy. It sounds like bad luck. Cruel, sudden, impossible bad luck. The kind of bad luck that can take a man who seemed almost superhuman and remind the world that he was still human. Bruce Lee had built his life on control. Control of the body, control of movement, control of speed, control of discipline. He studied how to remove wasted motion. He trained himself to become faster, sharper, stronger, and more direct. But inside the human body, there are things no one can fully control. A hidden sensitivity, a rare reaction, a medical event no one sees coming. That possibility makes the story even more tragic. Because if Bruce Lee died from a rare reaction, then no enemy needed to enter the room. No secret killer needed to appear. No conspiracy needed to unfold. The danger was already there, hidden inside an ordinary tablet. That is difficult for fans to accept, because Bruce Lee's life was extraordinary. So people expect his death to be extraordinary too. They expect a huge secret, a powerful enemy, a shocking $5 answer. But sometimes the truth is smaller than the legend. Sometimes the truth is not satisfying. Sometimes it is not dramatic enough. And that is exactly why people reject it. Because how can the dragon die from a pill? How can the man who changed martial arts cinema disappear after a headache? How can someone who looked invincible be taken by something invisible? That is the emotional center of the mystery. Not only what happened, but why it feels so wrong. investigators also had to consider the delay in medical treatment. Even if the tablet caused the reaction, there was still another painful question. Could faster treatment have saved him? When Bruce could not be awakened, emergency help should have been immediate, but the timeline shows that valuable time passed. Private doctors were called first. An ambulance came later. Bruce reached the hospital very late. By then, doctors could not bring him back. This does not prove foul play, but it deepens the tragedy. Because if the reaction was rare, the people in the apartment may not have understood what was happening. They may have thought he was sleeping deeply. They may have panicked. They may have tried to avoid public attention. They may have believed a private doctor was the best choice. But whatever the reason, time was lost. And in a medical emergency, lost time can become fatal. That is why Bruce Lee's final hours remain painful to examine. Every moment feels heavy. The headache, the pill, the nap, the phone call. The failed attempts to wake him, the doctor, the ambulance, the hospital, the declaration of death. Each step feels like a door closing. And by the time people understood the seriousness, all the doors were closed. For Bruce's family, this was not just a mystery, it was grief. His brother wanted answers, not because he wanted rumor, not because he wanted scandal, but because a family cannot heal when the story feels incomplete. When someone dies suddenly, the mind searches for another. It asks the same questions again and again. What happened? Could it have been stopped? Did he suffer? Was anyone responsible? Was he alone? Did he know? Those questions are not only investigative, they are human. And in Bruce Lee's case, the whole world asked them too, because the world felt like it had lost someone before his time. A man at the doorway of history, a man about to become an international icon, a man whose greatest success was still about to happen. And then, in one evening, he was gone. The forensic theory does not make that loss easier, but it gives the mystery a shape. It suggests that Bruce Lee may not have been murdered, he may not have been betrayed, he may not have been the victim of a hidden enemy. He may have suffered a rare, fatal reaction to a drug that was not fully understood at the time, a tragic accident, a medical storm, a one-in-a-million disaster. And perhaps that is the hardest answer of all, because it gives people no villain, no final confrontation, no dramatic justice, only a painful truth. Bruce Lee did not lose a fight. He did not meet a stronger opponent. He did not fall in battle. He lay down with a headache and never woke up. After all the rumors, all the theories, and all the unanswered questions, the investigation came back to one final possibility. Bruce Lee may not have been murdered. He may not have been poisoned by an enemy. He may not have been the victim of a secret plot. He may have died because of one terrible medical reaction, a reaction no one in that room could see coming. A reaction hidden inside a small tablet taken for a headache. And that answer is almost harder to accept than a conspiracy, because a conspiracy gives people someone to blame, a villain, a motive, a secret, a story that feels big enough for the death of a legend, but a medical accident feels too small, too cruel, too ordinary. And Bruce Lee was not ordinary. He was 32 years old. He was powerful. He was disciplined. He trained like few people trained. He had built his body into something sharp, fast, and almost unreal. To millions of people, Bruce Lee looked invincible. But the final truth of the investigation suggests something painful. Bruce Lee was still human, and sometimes the human body can be taken down by something no one expects. The official story had always pointed to the painkiller, but for years, many people focused on aspirin. Aspirin sounded too common, too familiar, too harmless to explain the sudden death of Bruce Lee. But the painkiller was not only aspirin, it also contained another ingredient, meprobamate, a tranquilizer, a drug that was once widely used, but later became known for serious risks in some people. This detail changed the way the case could be understood, because Bruce Lee may not have reacted to the part of the pill everyone talked about. He may have reacted to the part most people forgot. That is where science became more important than rumor. The evidence showed fatal swelling of the brain. The timeline showed Bruce took the tablet before lying down. The medical theory suggested that a rare reaction may have triggered the swelling that killed him. Not because Bruce was weak, not because he was careless, not because anyone knew it would happen, but because rare reactions are unpredictable. They can happen without warning. They can strike one person while thousands of others take the same drug without disaster. That is what makes the conclusion so tragic. Bruce Lee's fate may have been sealed in a moment that seemed completely normal. A headache, a tablet, a nap. No one in that apartment could have looked at that scene and imagined history was about to change. No one could have known that Bruce Lee was lying down for the last time. But that does not remove the pain of the delay. Because even if the tablet caused the reaction, another question remains. Could faster emergency treatment have saved him? That question may never be answered fully. But it is one reason the mystery has never completely disappeared. When Bruce could not be awakened, the emergency response was not immediate in the way people now expect. Private doctors were contacted. Time passed. An ambulance came later. By the time Bruce reached the hospital, it was too late. This does not prove a crime. It does not prove guilt. But it does make the story more painful. Because sometimes tragedy is not caused by one decision. Sometimes it is caused by a chain of decisions. A small delay, a wrong assumption, a moment of confusion. I hope that it is not as serious as it looks. And by the time everyone understands, the chance is gone. That may be the most haunting part of Bruce Lee's final day. The possibility that no one wanted him dead. No one planned it. No one expected it. But still, everything went wrong. For Bruce's family, that answer could bring some peace, but never full comfort. Because an answer is not the same as having someone back. Robert Lee wanted to know what happened to his brother. He wanted to know if Bruce suffered. He wanted to know if there was foul play. He wanted the truth beneath the rumors. And the conclusion offered something important. It suggested that Bruce Lee likely passed away peacefully. He had gone to sleep. He did not wake up. There may have been no long struggle, no final pain, no dramatic final moment, only silence. That is heartbreaking. But it is also gentler than many of the darker stories people told for decades. Because after Bruce died, the world filled the silence with rumors. Some people blamed Betty Ting Pei. Some questioned Raymond Chow. Some pointed to business conflicts. Some imagined enemies in the shadows. Some spoke of curses. But rumors often grow where grief has no answer. And Bruce Lee's death created a grief too large for people to understand. He was not just a movie star, he was a symbol. For Asian cinema, for martial arts, for discipline, for self-belief, of breaking barriers. For proving that one man with enough fire could force the world to look at him differently. That is why his death felt impossible. People did not only lose an actor, they lost a future. They lost the films he never made, the roles he never played, the students he never taught, the ideas he never finished, the version of Bruce Lee that would have existed after Enter the Dragon. That is the ghost inside this mystery. Not only what happened that night, but what never happened after. Bruce Lee never saw the full worldwide explosion of his fame. He never saw how deeply his image would travel. He never saw generations of fighters, actors, athletes, and ordinary people carry his words and movements into their own lives. He never saw how permanent he would become. And perhaps that is why people keep returning to his death. Because the ending feels unfinished. It feels like a sentence cut in half. A door opened, then suddenly closed. A man on the edge of everything, gone before the world could fully celebrate him. The investigation may point toward a tragic medical accident. It may suggest that no hidden killer was waiting in the shadows. It may explain the swelling, the tablet, and the rare reaction. But it cannot remove the sadness. It cannot remove the shock. It cannot remove the feeling that Bruce Lee left too soon. That is why his death remains one of history's greatest entertainment mysteries. Not because there are no explanations, but because every explanation feels smaller than the legend. A man like Bruce Lee seemed too alive to die quietly, too strong to be taken by a pill, too important to disappear in a private apartment on an ordinary evening. But sometimes the truth does not care about legend. Sometimes the truth is cold. Bruce Lee complained of a headache. He took a tablet. He lay down. His body suffered a reaction no one expected. Help came too late. And by 11:30 that night, the dragon was gone. The mystery may never satisfy everyone. Some will always believe there was more. Some will always question the timeline. Some will always wonder about the people in the apartment. Some will always refuse to accept a medical accident. But the most evidence-based answer points to tragedy, not murder. A rare reaction. A fatal swelling of the brain, a sudden end to one of the brightest leaves in cinema history. And maybe the final lesson is this. Bruce Lee was extraordinary, but he was not immortal. He gave the world speed, power, philosophy, courage, and a new image of what a martial artist could be. Then in one shocking night, he was gone. But the mystery of his death did not erase his life. It made people look back even harder, at the films, at the training, at the words, at the dream. And 50 years later, the question still echoes. What really happened that day? The answer may be tragic, the answer may be simple. But Bruce Lee's legend remains anything but simple. Because the man died young. but the dragon never truly disappeared.